You're watching Race to Power. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. Let's begin with the breaking news that's coming in at this moment. According to a draft statement by Kiev's allies ahead of a summit in Paris, the United States will lead a ceasefire monitoring and verification mechanism with European participation if a peace deal is agreed upon in Ukraine. Now, Washington has committed to support a European-led multinational force deployed in Ukraine after an eventual ceasefire in case of a new attack by Russia. The troops are to be deployed in Ukraine after the ceasefire. The grouping is called Coalition of the Willing. Remember, by September last year, 26 countries had formally pledged to deploy troops or provide other military assistance. But pledges have outpaced action. Only the UK and France have committed actual soldiers. Poland, Spain and Italy have all declined to contribute ground forces. Meanwhile, Germany has left the door open but made participation only after parliamentary approval and American involvement. Finland and Estonia, on the other hand, raised concerns that deployments would dilute their own border defenses. European officials are citing differing estimates for the size of a potential Western peacekeeping contingent in Ukraine, with figures ranging from 15 to 20,000 troops, though some hope that the force could approach at least 30,000. That's the latest that is coming in. Let me go across to our correspondent Susan Teherani. She's joining us to get us more details. Susan, it's one of the security guarantees that President Volodymyr Zelensky had wanted from its European allies, Ukraine's European allies, that of having ground troops. The United States now perhaps agreeing to this.
Yes, but the draft still needs approval at this summit later in the day. This was a draft put forth prior to the summit. They're meeting right now. Of course, there's going to be discussion on this, but it appears that there is some kind of agreement that a U.S.-Ukraine coalition of the willing cell will be established in Paris. Now, to what extent the United States will be involved, there's a quote that says these commitments may include the use of military capabilities, intelligence and logistical support, diplomatic initiatives, adoption of additional sanctions. So it's very broad-based. But yes, that language that you mentioned that the United States may be committed, it's still not clear whether or not it's boots on the ground or it's assistance, for example, in a place like Paris. But I think we'll get a better understanding once the summit's finished.
That's right. Susan, thanks very much for joining us, getting us the latest. We'll keep touching base with you as and when more details trickle out of this particular Paris summit that is underway. The visuals on your screen a short while back. French President Emmanuel Macron not just invited Volodymyr Zelensky, invited European allies of Ukraine as well. And right now, as we speak, that summit is underway. We'll have to wait and watch what really comes out of this meeting. Remember, security guarantees has been one of the most pertinent issues, along with, of course, territory. And one of the demands of Ukraine has been to have on-ground troops by the European allies as well as America. So let's wait and watch whether Donald Trump does give in to this demand of Volodymyr Zelensky finally. Let's shift our focus to Venezuela now, where Nicolas Maduro's capture and ouster has taken Venezuela by surprise. The country is stepping into a post-Maduro era. But despite Nicolas Maduro's absence, the ideological power center remains the same in Venezuela. The troika of presidency, parliament and judiciary is standing its ground, supported by the army, Supreme Court and the parliament. Maduro's vice president has taken charge of the country as the interim president. Women whose political roots, just like Maduro, remain deeply entrenched in Hugo Chávez's Bolivarian revolution.
La tranquilidad económica. I swear by Bolivar, I swear by our liberators, and I swear by our brothers and sisters who accompany us and must unite as one people, from all political sectors in Venezuela, from all social and economic sectors, who want to move forward as one country to bring Venezuela out of this terrible hour of threat to the stability and peace of the nation. I swear.
Por nuestros hermanos y hermanas.
Now, Delcy Rodriguez is backed by two of Maduro's strongmen and his son, Nicolas Maduro Guerra. They've all said that the country is in good hands. The other two pillars are Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello and Military Chief Vladimir Padrino. Together, they control Venezuela's men-in-arms. Their role will largely determine the balance of power in Venezuela. Diosdado Cabello also has influence over the Colectivos, an armed civilian group loyal to Nicolas Maduro. This leaves Delcy Rodriguez in a mix. How much wiggle room will she have until one of the two men who control the guns decide to turn the tide against her? United States, meanwhile, has laid down the law for Venezuela's new interim president. No drugs, no immigrants, and access to country's vast oil riches. The last part is the biggest sticking point. Maduro and Rodriguez are the prodigies of Hugo Chavez, who led the Venezuelan Bolivia revolution. Chavez was the one who nationalized the oil industry of the country, effectively expelling American oil companies from Venezuela. If Delcy Rodriguez allows Washington to have its way in Venezuela, she risks losing support from the ruling dispensation. If she resists, she risks dragging the country into a wider confrontation with the United States. And on top of this, Nobel Peace Laureate Maria Corina Machado has opened a new front. Machado is planning a comeback in Caracas. She says 30 million Venezuelans are now closer to freedom. Let's try and get a perspective on what this means, the entire political dynamic that is playing out in Venezuela. I'm joined by Diego Sequeira. He's a political analyst and journalist as well as columnist joining us live from Caracas. Diego, good evening. Thank you very much for sparing the time amid all the unrest that is happening in your country. I want to start by asking you how you see the entire political dynamic that is playing out in your country. You know, you've got Delcy Rodriguez, who's been sworn in. A brother is there who's been re-elected to the National Assembly. There is, of course, the army chief. So basically, Nicolas Maduro is out, but those who are close to him, the old regime, is still there. Wouldn't this lead to an internal rift?
Well, this is not an old regime. This is not a different government. This is continuity of government in all its legal, constitutional frame. A government that already states that we have an interim president because the legitimate elected president is being kidnapped by the United States, as we all very well know up to this point. But there is no dramatic shift in that sense. I mean, in the sense of, if you see it from a state and legal perspective. So there's this attempt to spin it as something else, as full 100% regime change or something which is not. I mean, that's what people need to understand. Especially it has been clearly stated by the current interim president that the president is Nicolas Maduro, and we are expecting him to come back at some point, and that's the official position, I might add. I'm not a government official, of course, but that's what you can interpret of all that has been said and done under the frame of the Constitution.
You know, Diego, a lot of people think that this will benefit the Venezuelans. The fact that Delcy Rodriguez is at the helm of affairs and now there's change coming in. You tell us, will it benefit all of you Venezuelans there?
No, of course not. Especially under this frame, especially as operating with, long-arm imperial jurisdiction. It has no actual legal basis on any level. It's just a whimsical approach to this. And it's a government, by the way, not only a regime. I think regimes are everywhere in the world, but this is the Venezuelan government. So it's hard to predict that up to this point what is going to happen, I don't know, in a few days' time in order to have, well, a picture more maybe stabilized. But reality here now, it's really calm at this moment. So that actually challenges the U.S. narrative about saying that they have the country under control. They don't. They actually don't have a plan after the kidnapping, which it was a kidnap. And there's, like I said, there's no legal context for this. There's no legal ground for what they do, and there's no legal justification.
You know, Diego, it's interesting because the US President Donald Trump and the Secretary of State Marco Rubio continue to say that Venezuelans are happy that this change is taking place, but you call it the kidnapping of your president Nicolas Maduro. Whom does the world believe?
I don't know how you're going to believe the drug story when it was basically fizzling out throughout this 4 or 5 months of pressure. And especially when that narrative basically was shifted into what they wanted. It's oil. They said it clearly. It is about oil, and it is about pushing, according to their national security strategy, it's about pushing the extra hemispherical actors out of the Western Hemisphere. So there you go. I mean, if it is a matter of narratives, which one is the most coherent one that's been constantly the same, that it's denouncing, it's being attacked under pressure, under lawfare, under sanctions, under many kinds of disruptions, openly stated by the U.S. government throughout all these days, or are you going to believe Donald Trump or Marco Rubio for that matter?
Diego, I also want to talk about Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado. She's somebody who's widely recognized as a top opposition leader of Venezuela. She's a celebrated leader. She's even been praised by Donald Trump and his administration. She was not made the president, as was widely expected, and now she's called Delcy Rodriguez as the architect of torture. I want to understand from you what Venezuelans think of Machado. What's the popular sentiment about her?
Well, I'm happy to ruin that perception party because Maria Corina Machado doesn't have the numbers here. And this is even acknowledged by the same people that should have, after a regime change, imposed her, and they didn't. They don't see her. You can see Trump talking about her one more time. And for Trump, it's actually personal because of the Nobel Prize nomination and the efforts of Maria Corina Machado to get Trump's approval. So she doesn't have those numbers here, and she's not capable either to run the country at all. I mean, she's just going to, and if you follow what she's been saying in many forums and interviews, she's just openly stating that she's going to open the gates of the country for U.S. companies in some sort of windfall fire sale situation.
And so in conclusion, Diego, I want to ask you what you think and how you think Venezuela can now move forward with the kind of military strikes that have happened on America's part. And now with this regime, with this government being sworn in, Nicolas Maduro being out, how do you see your country moving forward?
It's uncertain, but one thing is quite clear. I mean, no one inside Venezuela wants what the U.S. wants, in the sense that they are very interested in us doing their bit in doing regime change. No one wants internal conflict. No one is actually celebrating. The people, the Venezuelans that are celebrating are the diaspora. And the middle-class diaspora that has enough time and money to be on social media, because there's another part of the diaspora that simply it's working and unable to participate and doesn't care that much. And many of that part of the segment of the diaspora is actually coming back to Venezuela. So there's no celebration, there's no party. And regardless if they support or not Nicolas Maduro, the overwhelming majority do not approve the resolution, quote unquote, of our problems by a foreign action, especially the United States.
All right, Diego, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for sparing the time for us and sharing your experience and your perspective. I hope your country achieves peace and stability as soon as possible. Stay safe. Thank you very much for joining us on WION. All right, let's shift our focus now. According to a Reuters Ipsos poll, Americans are divided over Donald Trump's action to remove Maduro from Venezuela. Most are worried that US might get too involved in the affairs of the country. The survey of 1,248 adults conducted on the 4th and 5th of January found that 34% disapproved of the US military action on Nicolas Maduro, while 33% approved of the Trump administration's decision. Another 33% were either unsure or chose not to respond. It also stated that support is sharply divided along party lines, with 65% of the Republicans backing the action, as compared with 11% of the Democrats and 23% independents. The poll also highlights widespread concern about Washington's involvement in Venezuela. Nearly 72% of the respondents said that they worry that United States could become too deeply involved, while 25% said that they are not concerned. The survey indicates that while support for the military strike is limited, anxiety about American engagement abroad remains high. U.S. forces carried out a pre-dawn raid, remember, in Caracas on Saturday last, capturing Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and handing him over to the American federal authorities to face prosecution on alleged drug trafficking charges. American President Trump later said that U.S. would run Venezuela for an unspecified period and did not rule out deploying ground troops as well. He also pledged to overhaul the country's oil industry, saying that U.S. would need total access to Venezuela's vast oil fields. All right, shifting our focus now to Iran, where anger continues to mount. Anti-Ayatollah slogans are being raised across the country. Protests have reportedly spread to hundreds of locations across Iran, and the Iranian government has vowed to crack down on what it calls our rioters.
اعتصابات سراسری و مامورایی که اومدن با معترضا برخورد کنن.
These are visuals from the heart of Tehran, where the police and protesters clashed in the city's Grand Bazaar. Smoke can be seen rising from what seems to be a tear gas grenade. Iran's ongoing protest has reportedly risen to at least 35. Over 1,200 people are set to be detained. This is according to the US-based human rights activists news agency. The protests, which have been taking place for more than a week now, showed no signs of stopping. The human rights agency reported that the casualties include 29 protesters, 4 children, and 2 members of the Iranian security forces. The agency also added that the protests have spread to more than 250 locations across 27 of Iran's 31 provinces. The group relies on an internal activist network and has been accurate in its reporting in the past. Remember, Iran's judiciary has warned that Tehran will offer no leniency to rioters, but it added that the public has a right to demonstrate. According to the Mizan news agency in the country, the head of the country's judiciary, Gholam Hossein Mohseni El-Jeli, said that Iran listens to the protesters and their criticism and distinguishes between them and rioters. The remarks came after American President Donald Trump warned that Iran would get hit very hard by the United States if the authorities killed more demonstrators. Protests, remember, erupted in Iran on the 28th of December when shopkeepers in Tehran staged a strike over high prices and economic stagnation. The demonstrations have since spread to other cities and expanded to include political demands. However, according to official announcements, 12 people have been killed in the clashes since 30th December, including members of Iran's security forces. In fact, that has only increased with each passing day. Iran's economy, meanwhile, has been hit hard by tough international sanctions. Its currency, the rial, has lost more than a third of its value against the US dollar over the past year. And Iran's inflation is in double digits. On Sunday, the government announced a monthly allowance for every citizen to alleviate the economic pressure. The allowance is equivalent to around 3.5% of Iran's average monthly wage. But shifting our focus now to the Russia-Ukraine war, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been undertaking a major government overhaul in the last few days. He has made a series of appointments at top posts, and out of these, the appointment of Canada's former Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, to the position of Economic Advisor for Ukraine has gained significant attention. Chrystia Freeland, remember, is a person of Ukrainian heritage. She has long been a vocal supporter of Kiev in its war against Moscow. But from the power corridors of Canada to the war zone of Ukraine, how did Freeland make this transition? And what are the complications this creates for Canadian politics? Let's dive deeper into her political career. A Liberal Party heavyweight, Chrystia Freeland was a key figure in Canadian politics. She has held numerous portfolios in Canada since the return of the Liberal government. Starting with the International Trade Ministry back in 2015, Freeland rose up the ranks and became Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2017. When Justin Trudeau returned to power in 2019, Chrystia Freeland was appointed as the country's Deputy Prime Minister. Under current Prime Minister Mark Carney, she first held the position of Minister of Transport and then worked as Canada's Special Envoy to Ukraine before taking the new job in Kiev. Now, Chrystia Freeland's resignation, remember, had triggered Justin Trudeau's downfall back in 2024. Their fallout came after she openly rebelled against Trudeau over increasing government spending. She then threw her hat in the ring to become Canada's Prime Minister, but fell far behind Mark Carney. And now, her resignation puts Carney in a tight spot. Mark Carney, remember, is already one seat short of a majority in Canada's House of Commons. Freeland's departure will push him further from the majority mark, making it more difficult to pass key legislations. According to Canadian law, Freeland's constituency will vote for her replacement within the next 6 months. Meanwhile, defending her move, Chrystia Freeland said that Ukraine is at the forefront of the global fight for democracy and that she will contribute on an unpaid basis as an economic advisor to Zelensky. The Ukrainian president has called this substantial overhaul important for making the country more resilient. He has, in fact, reshuffled the positions of key figures in Ukraine's security apparatus. He's appointed Ukraine's former military spy chief, Kyrylo Budanov, as his chief of staff. Apart from this, he has announced the removal of Ukraine's intelligence agency chief and the country's defense minister. Zelensky has been scrambling to handle the war and the wartime economy. At the same time, fighting has not subsided along the front lines that goes along the southern and eastern Ukraine. In his New Year's address, Zelensky said that a peace deal is 90% done. In February, the war in Ukraine will be entering its 5th year. It remains to be seen if the warring sides can bridge the 10% gap by that time. And now let's turn to the South American nation of Bolivia, where massive protests have broken out in the country over the end of fuel subsidies. There was chaos on the streets of La Paz, the seat of Bolivia's government. Hundreds of protesters clashed with the police, and security forces resorted to using tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. The protests are being led by the Bolivian Workers' Union. It's a trade union that represents workers from multiple industries, such as agriculture and mining. The unions in Bolivia have been protesting, remember, for days now. They're furious with the country's newly elected president, Rodrigo Paz. Paz assumed office on the 8th of November, and after just weeks in power, on Christmas Eve, Paz decreed an end to the fuel subsidies in the country. The price of fuel almost doubled overnight, leading to the widespread protests. Paz, however, justified his move by saying Bolivia wasn't able to pay for the subsidies, which was leading to fuel shortage. In fact, he also slammed the protesters and the earlier leftist government who had implemented the subsidy.
It turns out that 50 miners earn more than 213 municipalities in the country. That is injustice. That is what has been paid for 20 years, so that there are organizations in Bolivia that, under the logic of social representation, do nothing but kidnap the state. We have to free this state, and freeing the state will be with the truth. I, at least, do not intend to take a step back, not even for momentum.
Bolivia voted to end 20 years of leftist rule in last year's election. But the Bolivian Workers' Union, which was allied to the previous leftist governments, is reportedly seeking to become the main opposition force in the country. It's a standoff between Bolivia's new government and the old guard. But the question is, who will blink first? And with that, it's a wrap on Race to Power, but news and updates will continue on WION. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Bye-bye.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year, Kesariya at 100.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year, Kesariya at 100. Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS Centenary Year, Kesariya at 100.
Hello and welcome. You're watching WION World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look as to what is making headlines at this hour. Now, Europe, in its draft statement, has said that the United States will lead a ceasefire monitoring and verification mechanism and European-backed multinational forces in Ukraine in case of a new attack by Russia. This